I came home to silence no drip, no stream, just a shut-off notice from the HOA over $35. She, the HOA president, announced it under the clubhouse flagpole as if humiliation were part of the bylaws. But that evening, while I held the certified notice in my hand, her prized pool bubbled with fresh overflow, a spectacle stamped by official order. And that wasn't even the worst part. Let me take you back. The faucet let out one last cough, a hollow rattle of pipes, and then silence. No water, no mercy. Only the sound of copper echoing like a bad harmonica. I kept twisting the handle anyway because when something you've trusted vanishes, your first instinct is to test it again. A paper flapped on the front gate, edges curled from late summer heat. Shut off due to late fee. $3,500. $35. The smallest number I'd ever seen, printed larger than my dignity. Ed Margaret's voice came from the hallway, careful as if naming it out loud might make it worse. They did it, I answered. Cut us off for $35. She stood beside me, smoothing the paper with her hand. They could have called. They didn't want payment, I said. They wanted a stage. By the time we reached the clubhouse that evening, the folding chairs were arranged in rows and the air smelled of burnt coffee. The fluorescent tubes buzzed overhead, punctuating the silence between neighbors. On the bulletin board hung a bake sale flyer, corners curling like wilted petals. At the back, a casserole dish sat cooling, covered with foil, the community's way of showing we still pretended to gather in goodwill. Denise Harrington presided at the podium. She had the kind of smile that looked carved, lacquered, and set to dry years ago. She tapped the microphone. Click. Pop. Thank you for attending. We'll be brief. Our covenants require diligence and enforcement is necessary to protect everyone's property values. I stayed seated, but my voice carried anyway. Is water part of your property values? Heads turned, then dipped. No one wanted to be caught between my anger and her binder. Denise's eyes gleamed. Mr. Carter, we can't discuss private accounts in public session. There's nothing private about a man's faucet coughing air. Margaret brushed my sleeve. Easy, she whispered. I stood. The chair legs screeched across the floor louder than I meant. For the record, I said they shut off my family's water over a $35 fee. A gasp from someone in the back. Glenn, the treasurer, shifted papers like shuffling could erase the silence. Sir, notices were sent. 14 days in writing. I held up the taped notice, the corner smudged from my gate dust. I got this today, that's all. From the second row, a neighbor whispered, Is that even legal? The whisper wasn't meant to be brave, only honest. Denise answered for him. Our bylaws authorize service suspension for delinquency. Restoration will follow remittance plus compliance fees. Compliance fees. I turned the words over like rotten fruit. What's the fee for dignity? Her binder snapped shut. We all value order. Homeowners who care about community understand that. Order. Community. Words she wielded like pliers at a water meter. I remembered kneeling at my own boundary pin the day we moved in, brushing away leaves, marveling at the bright iron marker that told me here is yours, there is not. That pin had never lied. I've paid every month, I said. This isn't about dues. This is punishment. Glenn cleared his throat. Our records. Your records. I cut in, sit in an inbox, no one checks. You've switched to that vendor email again. Half of it lands in spam with the coupon codes. Denise's jaw tightened. She would have preferred I said this in private where walls could absorb the truth. This is not productive, Mr. Carter. It's very productive, I said louder. Everyone can see it. Hand rose timidly in the third row. Ma'am, maybe water shouldn't. Denise's stare silenced him. If you have nothing to hide, she said, you have nothing to fear from process. That phrase always finds me. I leaned forward. I have nothing to hide. I just have dishes to wash. Her smile cracked only for a second. Then pay your fee. I'll pay what's fair, I said, but not a punishment dressed up as policy. The air conditioner hummed long and low like a sigh that belonged to the whole room. My pulse kept time with the ceiling fan. Margaret's lilac hand lotion brushed my senses, and it steadied me more than any bylaw. I called the county, I told them. Utilities said HOAs don't cut water for late fees, not for pocket change. Denise tapped her binder. Perhaps next time you'll pay on time. Perhaps next time I said you'll knock on my door. A ripple of murmurs passed softer than applause, but more honest. Glenn shuffled papers pretending order could be stacked. We can't make exceptions. You made an example, I said. That's worse. Denise leaned into the microphone, each word dropping like a pin. Pay the late fee. Pay the compliance assessment. Submit reactivation in writing. No. The single syllable rang against the ceiling tiles. For a heartbeat, it was the only word in the room. She blinked, caught off guard. I'm sorry, I said no. No to assessments. No to fines invented at whim. No to weaponizing water. You're out of order, she hissed. You're out of neighbors, I answered. That's worse. Margaret tugged at my sleeve, warning me about pensions and savings. I nodded. I'll pay. What's just, I said. Voice steady now, but I won't pay to be humiliated. Denise's smile snapped back into place colder than before. She set her binder down like a verdict. If you want water again, she said, you'll play by my rules. I looked around at the bulletin board, the casserole, the bowed heads. The community deserved better than silence. Water isn't leverage, I told them. It's life. The AC hummed again long and low, filling the room with its mechanical breath. No one clapped. No one had to. I'd said what needed saying, and the real conversation had only just begun. The envelope was heavier than it needed to be, its corners bent as if someone had shoved it through the slot with more force than courtesy. On the front, certified mail. Final notice. My name typed in the same stiff font they used for holiday newsletters, only this one came with the weight of punishment. I slid it open at the kitchen counter, the casserole Margaret had left to cool, sending up a quiet steam beside me. The smell of almonds and green beans mixed with the sharpness of ink and glue. Final notice. Unauthorized modifications. Unauthorized modifications, I muttered. Margaret leaned in. What modifications? We've barely planted geraniums this year. The letter detailed supposed changes to structural exterior appearance and non-compliant fencing, both terms I recognized from HOA bylaw jargon. Yet the dates listed didn't match reality. One was last year when we'd been out of state attending my brother's funeral. Another claimed an inspection on a day the house sat dark thermostat set to 55. I flipped to the second page. Each paragraph stacked with fines, then late fees, then a compliance assessment. It was like watching numbers snowball down a hill you didn't even climb. I set the pages flat, smoothing them the way I used to smooth envelopes at the post office. My eyes caught the seal at the bottom, an embossed circle, except this one didn't cast shadows the way real embossing does. I traced it with my thumb. Flat, printed, Margaret. I said slowly. This isn't pressed, it's copied. She tilted it under the light, like someone scanned the original and dropped it in. Her casserole hissed softly, the steam catching the lamplight. That sound, that little puff of air, felt like the house sighing with us. I turned to my laptop and opened my inbox. 3 messages from the HOA vendor, all marked important. Only 2 had dates that matched the notice. The third was backdated as if someone had shifted the calendar on a machine. I scrolled further. A message from a neighbor flagged weeks ago. Check your spam. They're switching servers again. Margaret pointed at the screen. Look at the sender line. The domain changed. Exactly. Half these emails land in promotions or junk. They know that. They count on it. The porch swing outside groaned as the wind picked up. The creak came through the screen door like an old neighbor trying to comment but too polite to interrupt. I pulled out the deed copy we kept in a folder labeled House Originals. The seal there. Real indented, notarized, felt alive under my fingers. That one was iron. This one was smoke. I'm telling you, I said this notice is wrong. And they know it. Margaret folded her arms. If we can see it, others can too. Maybe you should bring it to Whitaker. He's retired, but he still keeps the old plats. I nodded, but kept flipping pages. A strange thing. The font shifted mid-paragraph just enough that my years in the post office caught it. No one else would see, but I had sorted millions of letters. I knew when a character leaned wrong. Whoever drafted this didn't even use the same typeface I said. She lifted the last page, squinting. And look at this stamp. She tapped her nail against the seal. The pixels fuzzed where the edges should have been clean. "This isn't real ink," she said. A silence fell heavier than the casserole lid. Outside the porch, swing creaked once more as if in agreement. I leaned back, holding both documents, our deed in one hand, the notice in the other. One cold, one warm. One truth, one forgery. The line between them was thin enough to change everything. The bell over the diner door gave its tired jingle as I stepped in from the gray Ohio morning. The place smelled like bacon grease old coffee and a sweetness I couldn't place, maybe the blueberry pie under the glass dome. At the far end of the counter, Whitaker was already there, a stack of rolled plats tucked under his arm like umbrellas for a storm only he could see. "Ed," he said when he saw me, voice easy as a porch in June. "You brought the paperwork." I lifted the manila folder I'd labeled House Originals. "And the notice," I said. "Such as it is." We settled in a booth near the church choir sign-up board. Someone had drawn a treble clef next to altos. "Welcome." The waitress slid over 2 mugs and filled them to the brim. "Cream?" she asked. "Black," I said. "Same," Whitaker agreed. He nodded toward the folder. "Let's see." I laid out the deed copy first, then the shiny new final notice. The waitress set the coffee pot on a nearby warmer with a soft clunk and drifted off to greet a couple in matching windbreakers. Steam rose from our cups, a slow ribbon that curled and disappeared. Whitaker pulled a pen from behind his ear, the old kind with a blue cap you could chew. "Start with your boundary pin," he said. "You still know where it sits." "Back corner by the boxwood," I said. "Found it the day we moved in. Bright iron just where the plat puts it." He unrolled his first sheet, a county survey from a decade ago. His thumbnail made a neat half-moon on the paper as he pressed it flat. "Here's the line," he said, tracing a tidy path with the pen cap. "And here's the pin. Now, your HOA's claim about a non-compliant fence angle," he reached for the notice and sniffed at it like it might give off a different smell, "depends on shifting this line by about 8 inches onto your side." 8 inches is a lot when it's my side, I said. He smiled without humor. "And nothing when it's theirs." He laid a transparent overlay, one of those plastic sheets he must have kept since before PDFs, on top of the plat. "This is the county baseline. These he's..." He tapped the notice with his pen. "Our fantasy measurements." The waitress returned, set the coffee pot down gently, and topped us off. For a heartbeat, she lingered watching the maps like we were reading weather. Then she slid a stubby pencil onto our table, the free kind with a tiny eraser. "Y'all holler if you need pie," she said, and moved along. "Tell me again about the seal," Whitaker said. I passed him the last page of the notice. He tilted it under the fluorescent light, the pen cap poised above the fake emboss. The steam from our cups drifted between us, and for a moment neither of us spoke. He finally shook his head. "Laser printed. No bite. Real seals pinch the fibers." "I thought so," I said. "It looks right until you touch it." He spread a second plat, newer, stamped 3 years ago, over the first. "Ed, they're stacking jargon on top of thin air." Unauthorized modifications is a catch-all for anything they think might stick. "Like spaghetti." "Like liens," he said, and let the word sit there a moment. "Think they'll go that far if the board thinks you'll fold at the whisper of legalese," he said. "They push until they meet a post." I could feel the old anger warming in my chest, the same heat I'd felt standing under the clubhouse fluorescents while Denise smiled like a crossing guard who liked the stopping more than the safety. "So I'm the post." "Not alone," he said. He circled the boundary pin on the plat with a delicate ring, then drew a clean line along the true survey edge. "You've got more neighbors on your side than you know. They just need something to lean against." A couple of teenagers shouldered in from the rain, shook their jackets, and beelined to a corner booth. One of them hummed a bar of the doxology under his breath off key, and it made me think of the choir board by our table. Community was a choir that had forgotten its words. Whitaker tapped the deed copy. Now, this is the important part. He pointed at the notary block. Every deed change, every formal notice this serious should be notarized if it claims authority over title boundaries. It's not strictly required for an HOA letter, but the way they're presenting this. He held it to the light again. They've dressed it up like a court order. That's misdirection. I heard the porch swing in my head. The old creak the night before had felt like a protest. How do we answer it? Carefully, he said. He drew a small check mark next to the signature line and then paused, eyes narrowing. He wet his finger and traced the bottom margin, then looked at me. This date stamp doesn't match the county file format for notices. They've aped it. Sloppy work. He reached for the deed copy I'd brought from our file drawer. Compare. We bent our heads together over the paper. The waitress slid the coffee pot onto our table again this time without a word and set it down so gently the saucers didn't rattle. Steam lifted between us thin as a curtain, then gone. This deed seal, Whitaker said softly, was never notarized. The sentence ran through me like a quiet bell. For a second, all I could hear was the faint hiss of the warmer and the scrape of a fork on a plate across the room. Then I exhaled. Can you put that in writing? I asked. I can. I will. He unsnapped a battered leather case and produced a carbon paper pad like it was 1978. And I'll attach copies of the county plats. You'll want a clean chain of evidence if this heads to the clerk. I nodded, the relief sharp and strange like a cold sip after a salty meal. If it does, I said it won't be because I picked the fight. It'll be because they made a lesson out of my faucet. He capped his pen, finally smiling. Paper walls crumble when truth leans hard. I held the notice again, felt its weight and its fakery. And then the weight I carried lighten half an ounce. I pictured Denise's binder and imagined the places where the glossy pages would bend if anyone pressed them with a real seal. The bell over the door jingled as the wind shoved it. A new rush of wet air slipped in, bringing with it the smell of pavement and the chatter of someone debating whether to try the pie. The choir board watched from the wall, patient as ever. Ed Whitaker said you'll need to decide how public you want to make this. I looked at the plats, at the neat lines that said what was true long before anybody tried to redraw it with a printer. If we're going to fix it, I said we fix it where everyone can hear. He slid the carbon pad toward me, steady as a judge. Then, let's make it official. The sound woke me, though it wasn't the kind of sound most people would notice. A single click, faint but distinct, carried in through the cracked kitchen window. I rolled over, checked the clock. 3:15 a.m. The house was still the kind of silence that almost buzzes in your ears. No taps running, no dishwasher cycle, no shower. Just that click. I padded barefoot to the kitchen. The tile was cold, and the refrigerator filled the space with its steady hum. I waited, holding my breath. Then I heard it again, the water meter that hollow metallic tick it makes when the valve shifts. Sam, I whispered. She was already awake, standing in the doorway with her robe wrapped tight. You hear it too? She nodded, rubbing her arms. That wasn't inside. I tapped the phone mounted on the counter and pulled up our porch camera feed. Grainy black and white filled the screen. At first, all I saw was the porch swing rocking slowly in the night breeze. Then, the motion alert snapped the frame wider, and a figure crouched at the curb came into focus. He wore a ball cap low over his face, clipboard tucked under one arm. The other hand worked clumsily at the water meter box. Every few seconds, he looked up like a kid caught sneaking cookies. Sam leaned over my shoulder. "Pause it," she said. I froze. The frame zoomed in. The clipboard's front sheet was angled just enough for the porch light to catch a stamp. The HOA insignia, bold and familiar, shone like a signature of guilt. Her jaw tightened. Who carries an HOA clipboard at 3 a.m? Someone who doesn't want this on record, I said. I let the video roll again. He adjusted the valve, tapped something on the sheet, then stilled when the porch swing creaked. That swing had been hanging since we moved in its chains, groaning in weather and memory alike. Now, in the quiet dark, it betrayed him. He glanced nervously toward the house, then slunk away down the sidewalk, a clipboard hugged close like contraband. I could feel my pulse in my throat. That's tampering. Plain as day or night. Sam scrubbed the footage back frame by frame, her thumb steady. She zoomed until the pixels nearly blurred, then froze again on the insignia. The seal was grainy, but clear enough. HOA property used in the dead of night. A meter doesn't lie even in the dark, she murmured. The refrigerator kicked on louder, filling the pause that followed. It was the kind of silence that settled not with peace, but with proof. I saved the log, exported the clip, double-copied it to our server and a thumb drive. Evidence neat and cold. Outside the neighborhood lay quiet porches, still mailboxes shut, street lamps haloed in mist. Somewhere a post office van would load up for the morning, its engine coughing awake. Life would look ordinary again in just a few hours. But on my screen, the truth glowed a trespass, dressed as procedure. Sam leaned back against the counter, arms folded. They'll say it's routine maintenance. They'll dress it in paperwork. Then we'll dress it in timestamps, I said. This camera doesn't forge. She gave a short laugh, but there wasn't much humor in it. Proof cuts both ways. They know you've got it now. I looked again at the frozen frame. The insignia gleamed back careless but undeniable. My mind returned to the deed Whitaker had pointed at 2 days earlier, the seal that hadn't been notarized. Paper bending under false authority now, pixels bending toward truth. The fridge hummed on steady as my heartbeat tried to catch up. I imagined Denise at her desk in the clubhouse casserole dishes, cooling on the counter behind her, typing out the next final notice with that same smug curl of her lip. She believed in power through paperwork. But power had stepped into my yard tonight, and the lens had caught it. I closed the phone, set it face down, and let the dark room settle. Outside, the swing creaked again, only the wind this time. The house smelled faintly of last night's casserole still lingering in the oven. Home things, normal things. Yet nothing felt normal. Tomorrow, I would print this frame, the HOA seal shining from the clipboard, and slide it into a folder labeled 03:15 a.m. Another brick in the quiet wall we were building. For now, I sat back at the kitchen table, the chair cold against my shoulders, and listened to the refrigerator breathe. The proof was ours. And it carried their own emblem. By the time the potluck tables were set, the October air had cooled enough that steam curled above every casserole dish. I carried a dented thermos of coffee in one hand, my other clutching the manila folder with copies of the Platts and the latest notice. I hadn't planned to speak, but the weight of that folder told me otherwise. Neighbors gathered in the cul-de-sac, kids on scooters chalking half-finished hopscotch grids across the asphalt. Folding tables sagged under potato salad, deviled eggs, and someone's overambitious lasagna. The smell of charcoal hung heavy, a half-dozen grills crowding the circle, each one tended like a shrine. When the first greetings quieted, I set my thermos on the corner of a table and cleared my throat. "Evening, folks. I need a few minutes before we dig in." The grill nearest me sizzled as the cook flipped burgers. Then, as if the sound knew its cue, the sizzle died when he shut the lid. The silence felt like a held breath. I pulled the first page from the folder. It was the survey Whitaker had circled at the diner, the boundary pin etched clearly in county ink. "This pin hasn't moved in 40 years, I said. "But the board says otherwise. They've redrawn lines on paper and told us we broke rules by simply living on our own land." Heads turned, murmurs spread, Mrs. Gable's shawl, wrapped tight, shuffled closer. Her eyes met mine. In her hand she carried yellowed notices with the same embossed letterhead fines that had cost her winter heat. I held them up. She was told her attic insulation violated fire code. Charged thousands. No inspection record exists in county files. What she has, what I have, what some of you have, is intimidation disguised as governance. The folder spread wider plats, deeds, copies of late-night camera logs. But the page that mattered most was blank at the top, its lines waiting for ink. "This," I said, "is a petition. Article 9 of our own bylaws says 25% of homeowners can call an emergency recall meeting. That's the only way this ends fairly, with a vote." There was a silence again, heavier than before. Then a neighbor I barely knew, the young father whose kids' chalk drawings marked the street, stepped forward. He scribbled his name almost defiantly on the first line, Mrs. Gable followed her hand, trembling but firm. About time, she whispered. One by one, pens scratched. The sheet filled, then the next. Sam kept count at my side, her laptop open on the picnic bench. The numbers climbed faster than I dared to hope. The moment built until even the children stopped their chalk games to watch. I thought of Denise's smirk in the clubhouse, the water shut off like a punishment for disobedience. The humiliation had burned then, but tonight it warmed differently, like coals catching under shared breath. I raised one of the completed sheets high enough for everyone to see. Tomorrow at 9 we file. For a second, no one moved. Then, at the far end of the table, a clap cracked the silence. Another joined, then another. The grills hissed again as lids lifted, smoke rising like incense to seal the moment. Community isn't paperwork, I said over the applause. It's people signing together. Sam leaned close. That's a line worth printing, she whispered. I nodded. Viral or not, it was true. The petition sheets bore more than names, they carried the weight of neighbors deciding to stop being afraid. As casserole spoons clinked against Pyrex and the kids reclaimed their chalk, I slipped the signatures into the folder. Boundaries drawn falsely on paper had begun to bend, but this ink would hold. And tomorrow we would carry it through the courthouse doors. Injunction granted the clerk read, and the words landed with the soft weight of rain on dry ground. A brass bell on the counter chimed once as she stamped the order. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The language on the page did the heavy lifting. Temporary injunction. Cease and refrain. Authority of the court sentences built like load-bearing beams. She pressed the embossed seal with both hands. The paper dimpled and held. I let out a breath I didn't know I was saving. Margaret squeezed my elbow. Whitaker stood a step behind us, palms folded on the head of his umbrella like a man at church. The clerk slid the order across the counter for me to sign receipt. A copy for your records, she said. A certified copy for posting. She tapped the seal. Make sure the public one is the certified. I ran my thumb around the emboss real pinch and the fibers real teeth under the heel of my hand. Yes, ma'am? She nodded toward a stack of smaller forms. You'll want the access list as well. If you're changing locks, we need names. Date, time, and keys issued. We have a locksmith waiting at the clubhouse, Margaret said. Can we post before we rekey? That's the order, the clerk replied. Read it, post it, then act. Whitaker's pinky traced a line on the margin. And photograph the posting, he murmured. Front and center next to their bulletin board. Make it public. We stepped back into the hallway. The county building smelled like toner and floor wax and a faint sweetness that always made me think of peach cobbler from the VFW bake sale. I carried the certified copy like something fragile and heavy all at once. At the clubhouse, the air was a different kind of stale coffee that had boiled too long paper dust, a hint of chlorine drifting in from the pool. The bulletin board was layered with flyers, old and new, lost catcraft night window boxes, best practices. But in the middle there was a clean square where a poster had been recently pulled. I pinned the injunction there. The pushpins squeaked. The paper lay flat, the seal catching the fluorescent light. Read it, Whitaker said softly. I cleared my throat. Neighbors had started drifting in. Nate, still in his yard hat, Mrs. Gable, with her shawl, a couple I recognized only by the way they always waved from their porch swing. I read each clause steady and slow, the way I used to read out registered letters at the counter so the name landed right. Effective immediately, I finished. Suspension of any utility shutoffs, fines, or assessments not expressly authorized by covenants and applicable law. Restoration procedures to begin without delay. For 3 seconds, no one spoke. Then a small sound, the clack of the locksmith's kit on the floor. He lifted his chin at me. Ready when you are. We moved to the office door. Denise's framed agendas stared down from the wall, every date neat as a row of teeth. The locksmith set his pick twisted, and the old cylinder turned with a tired sigh. He swapped the core, slid the new one home. Click, not loud, final. Somewhere outside, the pool pump answered with its own low thrum. I felt it in my ribs more than I heard it, the water beginning to move. "Keys, please," Ms. Rios said. She'd met us from the county to witness. Her clipboard, no insignia I didn't recognize this time, held a clean sheet titled Access List. Signatures and key numbers. I handed the first brass key to Margaret. She signed. I took the second. Whitaker, as auditor for our evidence chain, signed as witness. The locksmith initialed the key tag. When Ms. Rios slid the access list across the table toward me, its edge whispered against the laminate. I signed on the line, date exact time to the minute. That little slide felt like a cliff all its own. "Justice reads aloud, then signs the ledger," I said, without meaning to. Miss Rios's mouth ticked at one corner, and then it turns the lock. We stepped back outside into the sharp light. At the pool gate, we posted a copy of the injunction next to the rules placard: no diving, no glass, court order in effect. A couple of teenagers paused their argument about whose turn it was with the basketball and read the seal like it might announce free pizza. "Next up," Whitaker said quietly, "deed correction filing." He tapped the deed copy I carried. "We bring this to the recorder after lunch." From across the deck, Glenn and Marla stood by the clubhouse door, faces tight. Denise wasn't there. For the first time, I realized I didn't need her to be. "Procedure continues," Ms. Rios said, eyes on her checklist. "Water service restoration posting, complete locks, changed access recorded. We also recommend testing the pool autofill given last week's complaints about low level. Document that, please." The pool pump changed pitch, a gentler hum as the fill line opened. A thin arc of fresh water spilled into the deep end, clear as glass. Nate drifted to the rail. "Always wanted to know how that thing works," he said to no one, leaning on his cane. "It runs until the float hits set point," the locksmith offered, unexpectedly technical. "Like a big toilet, but prettier." The arc grew thicker. Sunlight made a silver blade of it. Neighbors kept reading the posted order, whispering to each other, eyes catching on the seal the way fingers catch on stitched seams. Marla frowned at the surface. "Looks high," she muttered. I checked the fill valve housing metal warm from sun. Ms. Rios wrote something on her form, autofill test initiated time. The pump hummed on. The float bobbed. And then, just like a glass brimming past courtesy, the water touched tile and didn't stop. It sheened over the lip, slid down the concrete in a wide, clean sheet. Nate said. "Is it supposed to—" The locksmith reached for the valve box. "It'll seat in a second." The flow kept coming, fresh city water racing across the deck and into the gutter. White noise built until it drowned the mutter of the crowd. Kids laughed at the surprise, then backed up as it lapped their sneakers. Sun turned the spill into a bright ribbon that ran straight toward the posted injunction beading at the bottom edge where the seal sat like a ship's wheel. I stepped to the rail, shielding the order with my hand. The embossed circle glinted. There was no drama to it, no vengeance, just procedure witnessed. The system that cut my tap had just fed itself too well. Miss Rios lifted her phone, took a photo order seal spill clock on the clubhouse wall. "Documented," she said. "Autofill valve stuck. Recommend maintenance." Symbolically on the nose, but government doesn't do symbolism on purpose. Somewhere behind me, Glenn tried for humor and landed on confession. "It's fresh water," he said weakly. "From the same main as ours," I answered. We found the manual shutoff and closed it. The sheet thinned, then broke into drops that pattered down the tile and disappeared into the trough with polite little ticks. The pump settled back to its earlier hum. The bell inside the clerk's office might as well have chimed again in my head. Around us, neighbors laughed the laugh. People laugh when something true is undeniable and no one has to argue about it. Whitaker set his palm on the rail and shook his head, not unkindly. "Well," he said, "paper walls." I looked at the posted order, the seal drying in the damp air. The keys on the tag felt heavier than brass. We still had the recorder's counter to visit, minutes to stamp, lines to sign. But the day had done its talking. The order was up. The locks were changed. and the pool had overflowed with fresh water witnessed and logged. The access list signed and time-stamped lay on the table inside ink drying to a faint sheen. The next move belonged to anyone who could read. The clubhouse was fuller than a Sunday choir. Rows of folding chairs were packed shoulder to shoulder, and latecomers leaned against the bulletin board where flyers layered 3 deep rummage sale half-covering choir rehearsal, a craft night poster pinned sideways under a lost cat notice. The hum of voices carried the texture of hymnal chatter, expectant but uneasy. Whitaker stepped in beside me, hat damp from drizzle leather case tucked under his arm. "Ledger's balanced," he said softly. "Misapplied fees in red. They can't explain it away." At the center table, the refund ledger lay open like a hymnal. Its columns were plain, not legalese names, codes, dates, refund amounts. Next to some entries, neighbors had stapled receipts with notes paid under protest scrawled in Nate's blunt handwriting. Miss Rios lifted a brass bellkin to the one in the county office. "We are convened," she said. "Agenda Item 1 presentation of audit ledger and motion for refunds." The choir chatter dimmed to silence. Glenn fidgeted at one end of the table, glasses slipping, lips pressed thin. Denise sat at the other, binder closed, fingers knotted so tightly her knuckles showed white. Whitaker opened the book. "We traced deposits against bylaws. Where assessments exceeded authority or notices lacked legal basis, we reversed them. Totals are here." His pen tapped the last column. The number printed there was no small thing. It was the sound of hundreds of dollars coming back to kitchens and medicine cabinets. Someone in the back whispered, "So, they took money they weren't allowed to," Ms. Rios answered simply. "Verified." A hush fell like a held breath. I glanced toward the board where Whitaker had also pinned the corrected plat boundary pin circled next to the injunction order with its honest seal. Echoes of truth steady as posts in the ground. "Motion to refund," Ms. Rios asked. Nate lifted his cane. So moved. Second came from the young father who'd signed first at the petition. His voice didn't shake this time. "Discussion," Denise found her voice. "Premature," she said sharply. "We have procedures." Whitaker didn't raise his tone. "This is procedure." Glenn opened his mouth, then closed it again. His eyes stayed fixed on the numbers as if they alone could explain what his voice could not. And then silence, pure and thick. 3 full seconds of no cough, no shuffle, no chair scrape. A silence that trembled with decision. Then came the sound. 1 clap. It was Mrs. Gable Frail Arms' strong hands. The strike echoed louder than expected. Another followed Nate's cane-tapping wood, then his palms meeting. Then the young father. Then half the room. A single clap is noise. 100 is consent. The sound swelled until the windows themselves seemed to vibrate. All in favor, Ms. Rios called above the rhythm. Hands rose in unison like stalks seeking sun. Opposed. A few scattered. She wrote the tally with a stubby pencil. Motion carries. The clapping slowed, turned into a ripple of breath and relief. Whitaker slid the refund totals toward Glenn. "Checks or credits, homeowner choice." Glenn's pen scratched. His voice was small but audible. We'll make it right." Denise sat frozen. Madam President Ms. Rios said formally, "The chair recognizes the vote." All eyes turned. Denise's lips parted, then closed. She stared at the injunction pinned to the board, then at the ledger, then at neighbors who would face her at the mailbox tomorrow. Her hands unclasped. She leaned toward the mic. Her voice caught. The red light blinked, waiting. "Recognize the vote." The sentence was quiet, but it shifted the room, like a lock turning after years of rust. Whitaker re-entered fully now, calm as a conductor easing tempo. "Next steps," he said. "Post refund list by address. Mail notices within 48 hours. Prepare deed correction for recorder's office." Per the injunction, Ms. Rios confirmed, writing briskly. The room breathed again. Coffee steam mixed with rain-damp coats. The pump outside hummed steadily, a background chorus that seemed for once in tune. Neighbors exchanged hugs that were soft, a little ashamed, but real. The clap began again, not harsh, not gloating, simply full. Consent, not conquest. Whitaker touched my shoulder. "Ed, you did well." I shook my head. "We did. I just brought a thermos and a folder." He smiled at the ledger. "Paper walls," he said. Truth leaned. From the doorway I caught sight of a porch swing across the street rocking gently in the drizzle. Ordinary life resuming. Behind us, Ms. Rios sealed the ledger envelope with the heel of her hand. The adhesive's soft sound felt like a chapter closing. The clap rolled one last time, washing over Denise, over the board, over us all. Not thunder, not anger. Permission. "They took our water," I began. My voice low enough that the hush could carry it, but tonight we return it. The porch light above the clubhouse door clicked on with a faint hum. Around us, crickets rose in chorus as if even the smallest voices wanted to join. Neighbors filled the patio folding chairs arranged in a horseshoe around the pool fence. Pitchers of lemonade beaded with condensation on the tables beside paper cups stacked in leaning towers. A few porch swings across the cul-de-sac swayed with the rhythm of those leaning forward to listen. At the center table sat the transfer order, the embossed seal catching what little light the porch lamp offered. Beside it, a small tray lined with velvet brass keys resting in neat rows like medals waiting for recognition. Miss Rios cleared her throat. "We're gathered," she said, to acknowledge transfer of administrative authority as ordered. Keys will be placed, access logged plaque unveiled. Whitaker's hand brushed the folder at his side. He leaned close enough that only I heard. "This is the echo. Paper to metal, metal to memory." I stepped forward. "Neighbors, we asked for fair water. We asked for honesty in notices and for respect in ledgers. Tonight, we hold the order that restores both." The clerk's copy, signed and stamped, was lifted and read aloud. I could feel the echo of Chapter 1 in its cadence where humiliation had once filled the room. Now the law itself filled it instead. Transfer of authority acknowledged. Duties reassigned. Assets held in trust by community vote. Margaret picked up the first key hands, steady, and laid it on the tray. Others followed Glenn with trembling fingers, Denise with hands reluctant but deliberate. Each key clinked softly like a single note in a slow hymn. The locksmith logged the serials as Miss Rios recorded. When the tray was full, Whitaker nodded toward the plaque still draped at the far fence post. It was modest cedar-backed with brass lettering shielded beneath cloth. A boy from the choir group tugged the cord. The cloth slid away. Community water held in trust. Dedicated October 2024 by vote and consent. A hush lingered, then swelled into applause. The plaque caught the light, its brass face reflecting the lemonade pitchers and porch lamps. I swallowed and let the words find me. Legacy is water we promise to share. Someone whispered amen, soft but sure. Behind us, the pool pump hummed. The water inside the pool lay smooth, the earlier chaos of overflow long past. Tonight, it reflected porch lamps, plaque letters, and the faces of those who had chosen to stand. Neighbors drifted toward the table, signing their names beneath the transfer order. Kids pressed close, sticky fingers, leaving smudges on the edges of the paper. Sam poured lemonade into cups and passed them down the line. I stood back watching until I caught something at the row of mailboxes by the curb. The metal gleamed faintly, but on one door a cobalt fingerprint shone where someone's hand had brushed fresh paint. It was small, almost accidental, yet it glowed under the lamp like a promise still wet. Tomorrow, there would be new bylaws to draft, bank accounts to reconcile, notices to rewrite. But tonight, the plaque stood the order signed, the keys placed. Tonight, the legacy had weight you could see, touch, and pass forward. The crickets sang. Porch swings rocked. The clap of hands gave way to quiet talk, neighbors planning carpools and choir rehearsals again. The plaque caught it all. And at the edge of the circle, the cobalt mark lingered on mailbox steel, a reminder that stories echo in the smallest prints. The night air smelled of fresh cedar as the plaque caught the porch light while the brass keys rested quietly in the tray their weight finally shared. The embossed seal on the transfer order reminded us that community can correct itself not by anger but by ceremony. We had redrawn what was bent, and in doing so restored faith that neighbors can hold each other steady. Justice isn't loud. It's steady. Share your HOA story below your map might help someone redraw theirs.